Hi, everyone, back again. And I am sorry, I started to thank all the staff and I realized that we weren't even live yet. So all the commissioners are going to have to hear me again. I want to just start as we start here to really to thank everybody in the government that is working on this commission and working with us and with the commission. So, you know, they are partners, and it's such an incredible partnership that we have with Crystal, with Erica, Emmeline, Rebecca, Phoebe, Adrian, Victoria, Lenlen. There's just a whole team behind this, and I want to make sure we thank all of them for the incredible amount of work that we're doing and that we will get to do with them. And as we move forward, I just want us to think about a few things as you listen to the rest of the conversations today. Where are areas that we would want more information? Where are areas that we would like to have others come back and present to us? So as all of us as commissioners are listening, let's make sure we also keep thinking about who else we need to hear from, who else we want to talk to, where else could we use more information to inform decisions, to understand what's happened, to understand what more we can do. So keep that in mind, because as we set up these working groups and our subcommittees, this is going to be the opportunity we get to ask of and also talk to others in the government, as well as other experts that we may want to bring in to have conversations with us to talk about how we develop recommendations. So as you listen to the rest of these presentations today and the conversations today, please do keep that in mind. I know I'm certainly taking notes, but this is our opportunity to think about, you know, what else do we need and what else are we looking for in informing our decisions and our charge moving forward. So with that, I am super excited to reintroduce Crystal. We've heard from her already, Crystal Kai. She is, as you know, Executive Director of the White House Initiative and President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. She is also the first Native Hawaiian to hold this important role, and in her capacity advises the Biden administration on federal programs and policies related to AA and NHPI. So I am so lucky that I have been able to work with Crystal over these years, but I just want to say we are extraordinarily lucky to have her as our executive director and super excited that she is here. So I'm going to turn it over to her as she sort of introduces the Federal Interagency Working Group, how it works, why it's important for us, and how she interacts with them too.
Thank you so much, Sonal, and hello again to all of our commissioners joining us from all around the country and to our audience tuning in live. Again, my name is Crystal Kai, and I am the Executive Director of both the President's Advisory Commission as well as the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, or what we call WIONP. Both of these entities were created last May through President Biden's signing of Executive Order 14031. And although they are separate entities, the work of both the Commission and the initiative complement each other very closely. The White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders includes two major components, including a federal interagency working group, as well as a regional network comprised of federal officials based in the 10 regions across the country, who really help us to ensure that we are delivering on the President's promise to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about the IWG in my presentation, and you will be hearing more about our regional network shortly. I wanted to bring up these two components because historically, the Commission and our White House Initiative components have worked very closely together. And as Secretary Becerra mentioned earlier in his remarks, both of these entities, both the Commission and the Initiative, have actually existed for over 2 decades. They were first created under the Clinton administration in 1999. And so we have a long history of making sure that the federal government is really coordinating closely across the entirety of the government to ensure that resources are accessible and available to our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. And, you know, the real joy of having the Commission is also knowing that we have trusted partners outside of the federal government who can help to advise and inform the President and, you know, inform the work that we are doing as federal officials to make sure that government is truly working for the people. So I have the next several minutes of having the pleasure to provide a brief overview of the White House Initiative's Federal Interagency Working Group, or what we call the IWG for short. And I will discuss how the IWG and Commission will work in tandem to advance equity, justice, and opportunity under the work of this administration. Next slide, please. So for today's agenda, I will provide a brief background of the White House Initiative's Federal Interagency Working Group and share its purpose and membership. And then I will go into an overview of the IWG policy goals and priority areas. I will conclude by briefly going over the main deliverables for the IWG and describe how this group and the Commission will work together to achieve shared goals. And as you can see pictured here, there is a picture actually of IWG meeting with the President's Advisory Commission back in 2013 at the White House under the Obama administration. So we absolutely want to make sure that there is close work both between the Commission and the Interagency Working Group members as we move forward on the work that we have ahead. Next slide, please. In terms of background, as I mentioned earlier, the Interagency Working Group was created through Executive Order 14031 as part of the White House Initiative. And this executive order not only reestablished the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, or WIONP, but it also created the President's Advisory Commission, which you all currently, are just newly sworn in, and so we are so grateful again for the work of this initiative, as well as the Commission and the executive order that President Biden signed last May, which really not just reestablished these entities, but reinvigorated them and expanded them in ways we have never seen before. So in addition to changing the name, previously, I think many of you have worked with previous iterations of this initiative. It was formerly called the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And as Erica mentioned, in her remarks, this is the first time in history that Native Hawaiians have explicitly been named and included in a presidential initiative and commission in this way. And so we are truly grateful to the Biden administration for making that name change and making it very clear again to explicitly name communities that have often been overlooked and underserved by our federal government. So our new name is the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and it includes our Interagency Working Group that is co-chaired by U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Javier Becerra, as well as U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai. And both of our co-chairs also serve as co-chairs of the Commission. They are tremendous leaders, and we are so grateful to have them with us, and just their tremendous leadership leading this charge as we work to build a brighter future for our communities, knowing that we have faced significant challenges, especially over the past 2 years with the COVID pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to my role as both the executive director of the Commission and the initiative, we also work very closely. The executive order explicitly names the position of the Deputy Assistant to the President and AA NHPI Senior Liaison held by Erica Moritsugu. And so we work very closely with her to just make sure that we are coordinating our whole of government approach to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for our communities. Next slide, please. And so the purpose of our Federal Interagency Working Group is to advance, as I mentioned, equity, justice, and opportunity. And the way we are doing this is by coordinating our federal interagency policy making, program development, and outreach efforts to address barriers impacting Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. The IWG is charged with addressing issues specifically outlined in Executive Order 14031, and there are 14 specific mandates that are outlined in that executive order that include a number of different priorities that you will be hearing about later today, but I want to go over just a handful of them. Next slide, please. So first, though, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit more background on the membership of our Interagency Working Group. So the executive order that President Biden signed last May outlined 34 specific federal agencies that are listed as part of this Interagency Working Group. And it includes White House offices, cabinet agencies, and federal independent regulatory agencies. And I gave a few examples there so that you could see in the PowerPoint just the breadth of the types of agencies. So we have everything from, the White House Office of Public Engagement and our incredible colleague Howard O that we work very closely with, the White House Domestic Policy Council, who you heard from earlier through Ambassador Susan Rice, and we also have other presenters from the White House Domestic Policy Council who will be joining us later today. We have cabinet agencies, so those like the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S., the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and also others, the U.S. Department of Education. All of these entities are going to be working collectively together to make sure that we are able to deliver on the charge outlined in this executive order. And then we have federal independent regulatory agencies, so those like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also who are outlined in a part of this executive order that will be helping to assist our work. And, in terms of who the actual membership of this IWG is, it is comprised of senior level executive branch officials who have been designated by their respective agencies to coordinate the initiative's work across the entirety of the federal government, including both in terms of their headquarters in Washington, D.C., as well as regionally across the 10 federal regions. Next slide, please. And so in terms of our policy goals and priorities, there are, as I mentioned earlier, specific goals that are outlined in Executive Order 14031 that this interagency working group and the commission are tasked with pursuing. And in particular, there are 14 goals outlined for the federal interagency working group. And through the different, although they are a little different from the Commission's 7 policy goals that Sonal and Ambassador Tai outlined earlier, the goals of both the Commission and the initiative do have a lot of overlap, and we anticipate there to be a lot of synergy in the work that we are doing together. And from these policy goals that are outlined, and the 14 policy goals that are outlined in the executive order, the interagency working group is currently focusing on specific priority areas that are of most immediate concern to our communities. And this includes the need to address anti-Asian hate and violence, as well as looking at our response and recovery to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then also looking at longer-term systemic issues that we know are really cross-cutting and intersectional across various, issue areas, things like the need for better data disaggregation so we can truly understand the diverse needs of our communities, also the need for language access and building better capacity for our communities, knowing that, again, our, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders are the fastest growing population in the nation, but are also still a relatively young community and need additional, resources and support when it comes to accessing federal resources. And another key priority that we are going to be focusing on is just improving workforce diversity, both within the federal government as well as overall, so that we can ensure that Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders truly have an opportunity to be represented in all sectors of American life, and that we are giving them their support that they need. So in addition to the priorities that are shown here, I know that the IWG is also working on other key areas mentioned in the executive order that are not explicitly outlined here in my PowerPoint presentation, but that are still very critical to our community. And that includes things such as environmental justice and climate change, healthcare access and mental health, education, housing, civic engagement, and so much more. So I just want you to know that the scope of our work is vast, and we are going to be working on a number of different priorities with a particular focus on the issues that I have outlined in this particular slide here. Next slide, please. So I would like to go a little bit deeper into some of our specific policy goals and priorities for our federal interagency working group. And like the commission, this IWG will actually include subgroups that will be focusing on specific areas. So in particular, we have identified a few key priorities that we would really like to focus on just based on input we have received from community stakeholders about the most pressing needs impacting our community. And, at the top of mind for so many in the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community has been this rise and the need to address the rise in anti-Asian as well as anti-AA and NHPI hate and violence more broadly. And that's something that this administration and this president have made a key priority to address. 3 of the IWG policy goals that are outlined in the executive order specifically focus on addressing anti-AA and NHPI hate and violence. And this includes efforts to improve safety, access to justice and violence prevention for AA and NHPI communities, promoting inclusion and belonging for our communities, and also addressing barriers to learning, including bullying, harassment, and other forms of discrimination at school. Next slide, please. Another key priority for us, as I mentioned earlier, is to address systemic issues that have long plagued our community. And many of these issues, unfortunately, were identified over 2 decades ago as priorities for prior iterations of this initiative and the Commission. And although we have made some progress, we know that there is still so much work to do in these areas. And in particular, 2 of these areas that I mentioned earlier that we would like to tackle and we plan to tackle through this federal interagency working group are the need for greater data disaggregation for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community, as well as the need to create greater language access to federal programs, services, and initiatives. Although there has been progress on both of these issues over, like I said, the past 2 decades, you will hear a bit more. We have really excellent speakers lined up for you later in the program tomorrow who will be talking about some of these systemic barriers that have long existed. And again, although we have made progress in the past 2 decades, we know that we have not moved the needle quite far enough because we continue to hear consistently challenges in terms of our limited English proficient Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities trying to access resources that may not currently be available or translated into languages that are accessible to them. And then also the need to really ensure that we are captured in federal data where oftentimes, we are not always visible. I think many of us know on this, and you'll hear it later in our presentations from other speakers, but the need for more granular data that is specific to our ethnic groups that encompass the broad, and diverse Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community is so critical because without that disaggregated data, it is really hard to understand, the disparities that exist between different subpopulations and also to micro-target resources and intervention. So that is going to be a big focus of our interagency working group, and we anticipate having subgroups both for language access and data disaggregation. Next slide, please. Another big goal of ours is going to be capacity building. And in previous administrations, the initiative and Federal Interagency Working Group have focused on capacity building in the context of federal resources and federal workforce diversity. And so to address the current public health pandemic, we know that COVID-19 has been included as a key priority area that we would like to address, and also making sure that the IWG policy goals reflect the priorities that are included is also really critical. And so we really, for this capacity building piece, we know that so many Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, as I mentioned earlier, we're still an emerging population, and so we don't always have the capacity or the infrastructure. So many of our nonprofit organizations are volunteer run or have very small and limited budgets and may not know how to navigate and access federal resources and programs. So a big part of the work that we are doing, and especially in the context of our COVID-19 pandemic response and recovery efforts, both with regard to health and economic efforts, as well as education, we want to be able to focus on building greater capacity for our communities, making sure that they are aware of the federal resources available to them, and really prioritize that work. And then with regard to increasing, federal workforce diversity, as well as diversity and inclusion more broadly within the workforce, that is also going to be another very key goal for us, because it is so critical that we have leaders and representatives from our community in all areas of American life in leadership roles who can really ensure that the needs and concerns of our communities are being prioritized. And so I know that the Biden-Harris administration has made a very strong commitment to making sure that we have that representation in the federal government, to prioritizing not just diversity in the workforce, but also equity. And so that is something that we want to continue to do as we are looking to recruit and provide these leadership development opportunities for pathways within the federal government, as well as other forms of also, like I said, more broadly within the private sector as well, just to ensure that we truly have the representation and participation in the workforce that we need to ensure that policies and priorities from our community are not overlooked and are truly addressed at the highest levels. So I encourage you to review all of the 14 policy goals that are outlined in the executive order. Separately, we will send a link and make sure that is available. I know I did not have a chance to go through all of them, but there are so many different priorities that this federal interagency working group will be focusing on that are key priorities for this administration. And I was, so glad that we were able to go through a handful of them that we will be focusing on through our federal interagency working group in the short term. Next slide, please. In terms of deliverables for this interagency working group, so each member of the federal interagency working group is required to produce 2 specific deliverables. And one is an agency plan for how their respective department, office, or agency will help to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for our communities. And so, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, for instance, will create, a department-specific agency plan, and so will others that are outlined in this executive order. And then they will present that over to us as part of our federal interagency working group efforts. And then we are also asking that each member of the IWG provide progress reports so that we can make sure that we have a sense of not just what their goals are in terms of how to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for our communities, but also so that we can actually track the progress that they are doing in terms of implementing these goals and strategies. And all of these will eventually roll up into a report, an annual report that goes to the president each May to discuss how we are coordinating our whole of government response to address, all of the 14 charges that are outlined in the executive order. And so, I want to just show as well that there is going to be a lot of synergy in the work that we are doing through this federal interagency working group, as well as the commission. As you all work on recommendations to the president, it will be this IWG that is going to largely be tasked with providing technical assistance to you all to see, whether there are existing efforts already happening within the federal government that you may be able to build upon, or if there are specific gaps or challenges, that, need more attention. And I think a lot of the work of this IWG as well will be to help assist with implementing the recommendations that this commission ultimately comes up with as you are working to advise the president on this whole of government response to addressing a number of the key priorities we outlined above. Next slide, please. So this is just going back to a little bit more detail about the IWG and Commission, and how, although there are separate, specific roles for these entities, how that, we know that they are going to be working very closely in tandem with each other to inform each other's work. And so this graphic shows that the IWG has 14 policy goals and is comprised of federal agencies and senior officials within the government, and that agency plans, that they will be focusing on creating their agency plans and annual report to the president as key deliverables. We know that the commission, conversely, is, has 7 policy goals, and it's comprised of predominantly non-federal officials and leaders who will provide recommendations to the president and focus on improving the public, private, and nonprofit sector's engagement with the federal government. So again, although there are slightly different charges for both entities, they do work very closely together. And we know that, again, this symbiotic relationship is going to be very key to making sure that your recommendations to the president are, are taken up by our federal interagency working group and implemented, so that we can truly work together to move the needle on so many of these longstanding issues that have been barriers to our community. Next slide, please. So with that, I would like to conclude my overview of the Federal Interagency Working Group. I encourage you to learn more about our IWG by visiting both the website that is listed there for the White House Initiative, which you can access at www.hhs.gov/WHIAANHPI. And if you have any additional questions or comments relevant to the Federal Interagency Working Group, you can please contact me. I know our commissioners have my contact information. And for those in the general public who are interested in learning more about our Federal Interagency Working Group, you can email our email address at WHIAANHPI@hhs.gov. So thank you again. And with that, I will now make myself available for any questions that we may have.
Thanks, Crystal. For anyone that has questions, would you mind just using your raise the hand feature so we can make sure you're called on for any questions you might have, Crystal? Dr. Underwood?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. It seems a little overwhelming because, you have objectives and then you have goals and you have things like that. So the question I have is on these on the interagency working group. Is there a listing of who these individuals are, or is there a listing of which agencies were selected for that? And is that a closed list? Is it possible to recommend others or other agencies or groups that may have been sort of missed in the original conceptualization of this?
That is a great question, Dr. Underwood. So we do have a list, as I mentioned earlier, of 34 specific agencies that are outlined in the executive order that will be a part of this federal interagency working group. So we can make sure, and that list is available on our website, but we will make sure too that you have access to that. And then in addition to the 34 explicitly named in the executive order, there is also the president has the authority to add additional members to the federal interagency working group. And so we have already actually expanded that out to now we have over 40 different agencies that have received invitations to join our federal interagency working group. And just to clarify, the interagency working group is specific to government employees, so federal government employees. It does not include external stakeholders, but there are ways for the external, for whether it's nonprofit leaders or members of the general public to engage and interface with our group and to make sure that they are informing, again, the work that is being done. And so we have a number of different ways to engage with our federal interagency working group through the initiative. And I know we've already received some inquiries coming from the public. So when that happens, we will usually farm out requests to specific federal agencies that are in our interagency working group. So for instance, if we get a question for, the U.S. Department of State on what's happening in Tonga, for instance, given the recent, eruption and tsunami, then we can use our federal interagency working group apparatus to then reach out to our colleagues at the U.S. Department of State and ask for updates. And we've been able to do that for a number of different issues, just to make sure that our community leaders and also for all of you as commissioners can connect with the right people within the federal government to truly address a number of pressing concerns and policy issues.
Okay, thank you for that. And just, because like Carrie had mentioned the situation in Hawaii, obviously there's similar situations. There's similar situation here in Guam. So, very interested in seeing whether EPA is involved in this and the Department of Defense. So thank you very much.
That's great. Yes, Dr. Underwood, both EPA and the Department of Education are members of the federal IWG.
Thank you.
Louisa?
Yeah, so I know that there's progress reports that get submitted. Do we have access to those progress reports? That's my one question. And then number two, we will be assigned to subcommittees. And is there an opportunity for the subcommittees to meet with the IWG, depending on whatever the committee is doing, just so that there's a closer connection and we get more direct access and are able to, provide quick feedback?
Yes, absolutely, Louisa. So we will be able to ensure that our subcommittees and also IWG members at large are available to the commission if you would like them to come and brief you. We do have a number of actually members of our federal interagency working group who will be presenting later over the course of this 2-day meeting. So you will hear from some of them. But yes, absolutely. If you are really want to know what the Department of Education is doing on a specific issue or the Environmental Protection Agency, we can bring in those officials to brief the commission, either in one of these full commission meetings that you are doing open to the public or during one of your subcommittee meetings. So absolutely, that is something that will be available to all of you.
Carrie?
Thank you. Crystal, again, impressively large agenda that you just described. I like to be intentional in the efforts. Given the finite amount of time that we have on the commission, I like to set goals that are aggressive but achievable. And so the question that I have is, with everything that you described, do you realistically believe that it's all achievable?
That's a great question, Carrie. I think we are going to do our best over the course of this, commission and this initiative that are authorized for the duration of this administration to make as much progress as we can. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, this work is not just happening at this point in time, although I do believe we are at this really historic inflection point to make a difference. But this work has existed for over 2 decades. And so I think for us, what I would really like us to do, both through this commission and through the initiative, is ensure that some of these issues that were first raised as challenges under the Clinton administration, that we can actually make some meaningful progress. We know that the way, just within the federal government, things take time to enact. But, again, within this kind of window that we have, I do think there is an opportunity, especially given that this administration's focus on equity and making sure that communities that have not always had a voice in government are truly included. I think we have a very, a window to make a lot of difference for our community that will be long lasting. I mean, there are so many things done under the Clinton administration that we are still using till this day. And so I think, again, even though we have this short window, I want all of us to be very, mindful of the fact that even within the next 2 to 3 years, there is an opportunity to make tremendous and lasting impacts for our community that will resonate for decades to come. And then I also wanted to kind of go back to one of Lisa's questions. She asked, will the reports be available to the commission, the work of the Federal Interagency Working Group? And the answer to that is also yes.
And I have no qualms about the talent that you possess. And I can't speak for the whole commission, but as one individual commissioner, I would volunteer my efforts to help you in achieving your goals. Thank you.
Sorry, Victoria.
Yes, I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you, Crystal, for the information. And I know just with some experience with the Federal Interagency Work Group here in Region 4 in the Southeast, what are some of the other initiatives focused on some of the other target groups like the Latinx and the African diaspora communities, and how are we linking up? Does that happen to the Federal Interagency Work Group, or where does that happen? And, and how do we gain access to some of those reports to figure out where there's alignment and synergy to reach out, as we kind of, form or start joining some of these committees?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Victoria. And yes, absolutely. So we do have sister initiatives. There's a White House initiative that focuses on the Black community, the Latinx community, as well as Native Americans. And so we work very closely with them and have already been in touch with, their respective leadership to make sure that we can coordinate on areas of mutual interest and priority. And I think that's really important, again, knowing that, it's not just the Asian American, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, but so many communities of color that have faced just so many, really we've seen so many longstanding inequities exacerbated throughout the course of the pandemic. And so I think there was a lot of opportunity for us to come together to have that strong coalition and identify areas of mutual, interest where we can collectively work together. So there is already very strong desire to do that with our sister White House initiatives. And we would welcome, any feedback or thoughts that you all have too on ways that we can better coordinate efforts to ensure we are really making an impact on more broadly, not just for our community, but for communities of color and other underserved and underrepresented communities more broadly.
So we've got 2 people ready to ask questions. Ajay can't use his raise hand feature. So Ijen and Ajay, would you mind asking your 2 questions? Ijen, why don't you start and then Ajay give, and then Crystal can answer those because we're running out of time. Is that okay?
Sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Ijen, why don't you ask the question and then Ajay next?
Okay, great. Thanks, Sonal. Crystal, I'd love to hear from you in terms of the relationship between the Interagency Working Group and this commission. From your perspective, like if we were to knock it out of the park, like just be an incredible, more than the sum of our parts partnership, what does that look like from your perspective?
So hang on, let me just ask, Ajay ask his question so you can hold both of them together. Ajay, what's your question?
My question is very similar. Let's say we are working on a language subcommittee and we want to gather more information from across different agencies, Justice Department, Immigration, etc. So how do we leverage working through IWG to meet the right people and get the required information and go back and forth on it?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll start with Aiden's question. So, if we were to really leverage and harness our collective, energies, both with the initiative as well as with the commission, what does that look like? And I think for me, it means, having us not have to revisit these same conversations 2 decades from now, not having a future commission or initiative have to keep looking at how do we improve language access or data disaggregation for our communities? How can we actually create meaningful change, as I mentioned, in this kind of very narrow window that we have to actually affect long-term, change for our community? And I know in particular with the rise in anti-Asian hate, we have seen these are not new things, and I think all of us know that, but we have now been spotlighted in a national way that our community has never really received the sort of attention and visibility. And so I think even more so, there is just so much desire to see, really impactful and meaningful change. And so I know I keep referencing the Clinton administration and some of the things done then, but, the Clinton administration President Clinton created an executive order on language access that we still use till this day. And that was, done, 2 decades ago. So I think, again, if we think of creative ways to really think about in a big way, what can we do for our community, whether it's tackling those areas of, anti-Asian hate, language access, or data disaggregation, and creating those recommendations that will, not just live for the course of the next, year or two, but really have that longstanding impact within the federal government and also more broadly, within our society. I think that is really what I'm aiming to do and hope that we can do together through the work of this commission and through the initiative and, the leadership of all of you represented today. And then, Ajay, you asked about, again, how do we just really leverage and ensure that there is kind of, very close synergy between the work of the commission and the interagency working group. You mentioned language access. So absolutely, like I said before, we want to make sure that you are working closely with this interagency working group. If you need to be briefed, if you have questions about what is the federal government doing on a specific issue that you want more information about, just so you have a better sense of what existing work streams there are or where there might be specific gaps, we can connect you with specific members of our interagency working group. We can have them come in and brief you during one of these, public meetings or during one of the subcommittee meetings. So there are a lot of ways to make sure that, we can ensure that there is that interaction moving forward. And also, like I mentioned during my presentation, when it comes to your recommendations, it'll largely be members of this federal interagency working group that will ultimately be tasked with implementing, a number of the recommendations that you provide. So we definitely want to make sure that there is, communication and really robust interaction between the two components.
Thank you, Crystal, and thanks everyone for the great questions. I think we'll have many more after we go through the presentations today, as you'll hear from many of the interagency working group agencies that will be on this. So again, let's keep this in mind because it's super important. As you have more questions and what we want to hear through the subcommittees, through the commission, we can ask people to come brief us and give us more information so we can also take that into account in our recommendations. We're going to now move to sort of the next presentations, which are focused on the federal arm, the regional, the White House Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander regional network, which is a very important part of the network that we should be working, that will help us. And the regional network is the key component to the initiative that focuses on links to the AA NHPI communities within the 10 federal agencies. Our next presenters are Paul Chang, who is the White House Initiative, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Regional Network co-chair, working at the U.S. Department of Labor. Mr. Chang serves as the Regional Anti-Human Trafficking Coordinator and is credited with helping to eliminate sweatshops from the garment industry. Great to have you here, and thank you for joining us, Paul. And our next person, and the other one is our next regional network co-chair is Ben Raju. He is the regional network co-chair working at the Small Business Administration Association, and he serves as the district director of the SBA's Los Angeles district office, where he's responsible for the delivery of programs and services. Paul and Ben, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you so much, Noel. And hello, everyone. Welcome, commissioners. Good afternoon and good morning to all our friends in the Pacific. And to all our friends listening in, Happy Lunar New Year. And to those who are celebrating, wishing everyone good health. 新年快乐，身体健康，恭喜发财. Both Ben and I are humbled and honored to be here today, representing over 400 officials from field offices throughout the 10 federal regions. We are here in our capacity as national co-chairs for the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders Regional Network. The RN, as we are often referred to, is written in our executive order and is charged with coordinating and supporting extensive network of federal officials. Their work facilitates improved communications, engagements, and coordination between the federal government and Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islander communities throughout the United States and in our protected territories. Ben?
As career civil servants, we at the RN are building relationships between our government and the AA and NHPI communities by coordinating outreach efforts and connecting community stakeholders with federal resources. We live and work in the communities we serve in and are proud to be the on-the-ground connectors and problem solvers for our diverse community. Established back in May of 2013, the RN institutionalizes a very powerful community engagement mechanism and takes the federal government to the AA and NHPI community and into the farthest corners of our country. The regional network's engagement strategies have strengthened over time through localized feedback. Although the AA and NHPI communities share many of the same challenges we hear about at the national level, as many of you know, the AA and NHPI communities are often hard to reach or even fearful of government, and each community has their own unique issues and needs. Through in-person convenings, the regional network has conference calls, virtual events, and coordinates with the community to lead local roundtables and technical assistance programs across the federal government, sharing best practices and challenges with the AA and NHPI community, build relationships between the federal government and the local communities, as well as collaborate with state and local and AA and NHPI commissions and elected officials. We share information about federal resources, programs, and employment opportunities, as well as solicit community feedback and recommendations on current and systemic issues. We assess the capacity and building needs of the AA and NHPI community organizations and explore opportunities for engagement with philanthropic organizations and provide recommendations and guidance to WIAMPI that are included in the annual report to the President. And importantly, we work closely with each of you to implement recommendations of the White House Initiative and the President's Advisory Commissions on AA and NHPIs.
Throughout the years, the regional network has convened countless events, technical assistance sessions, trainings, and other workshops in cities across the country, from Atlanta to Des Moines to Portland to Honolulu, reaching thousands of people. Topics of discussions have ranged from addressing anti-Asian hate, healthcare, small business, the environment, veterans affairs, vulnerable workers, and so much more. The community response has been overwhelmingly positive, especially in areas where community leaders are engaging with federal officials for the first time. Through these efforts and recognizing the tremendous growth and unique needs within the AA and NHPI communities, the federal government has made great strides to improve the lives of workers, families, businesses within the community.
As you can see, the RN is uniquely situated to be the primary link between the federal government and the AA and NHPI community. Through our personal experiences and engagement, we understand the unique concerns and issues of our diverse communities face. In order to do the work that we do and stay connected, in addition to Paul and I, each federal region has a regional network lead or co-leads to meet the needs of the AA and NHPI community. These long-standing federal career employees are key to the community engagement and rapid problem-solving abilities of the RN. The regional network convenes monthly calls with our leads to share best practices, discuss challenges, and ways in which our community can work together. Going forward, we're excited to work with each of you to strengthen our engagement and increase our impact within the AA and NHPI community.
This approach and the regional network are a model of effective community outreach for the federal government. Currently, we are at an all-time a membership high of over 400 individuals from more than 20 agencies and sub-agencies. These diverse members from throughout the federal government proudly count themselves as WIAMPI Regional Network members, and that number is growing. The work we do perfectly complements this commission and interagency working group that you heard of earlier. We look forward to working with all the commissioners on our engagement efforts.
We believe in the work that the regional network has done and our advancement of equity, justice, and opportunity for all AA and NHPIs. It's an honor to welcome each of you here today, and we're excited to work alongside you and build on the good work that has been done, and look forward to working closely with each of you to support our community for years to come. Commissioners who are interested in connecting with the regional network, we look forward to that engagement. There are many familiar faces on this commission, and we know each of you have dedicated your life's work to support the underserved and underrepresented. Please bring us your ideas, thoughts, and experiences so we can work together and better serve the AA and NHPI community. Emmeline, Rebecca, and the WIAMPI staff are your connection to us here at the RN. Please work with them to coordinate our engagement, and please know that the entire regional network is eager to welcome and start working with each and every one of you. In closing, we'd like to share some images of our past engagements through the years, and if you look closely, you might see some familiar faces, and we're going to use the rest of the time to answer any questions that you may have. Again, on behalf of Paul and myself, welcome and thank you, and let's get to work. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we've got the next slide.
This is our 10 federal regions.
So you'll see that through the 10 federal regions, there are, as Paul and I mentioned earlier, there are, for each of these different regions, there is a represented lead. In some cases, there are co-leads, so there's two folks that are representing certain regions. List of those individuals and contacts are available on the WIAMPI website. And again, as we look at that targeted and coordinated approach to tackle issues, we can connect locally and through the efforts of the regional networks to be able to combine and coordinate our efforts to tackle those issues specifically. Next slide. Oh, next slide.
This is us with the commissioners in the past. And as you can see, the commissioners all interacted with the regional network on very closely. The reason being is that the regional network is the on-the-ground federal agencies. There's over 450 federal agencies in the executive branch, and we're your connectors.
Next slide.
These are these are more recent events that we are holding during COVID, since we can't really meet in person. We do that virtually. You might recognize some of our folks here. Next slide. We've done outreaches in various areas. We've interact, especially with commissioners. We have regular meetings with our commissions in the past, and also we also do events in other parts of the country. This event on the right is done at Salt Lake City, Utah. We do listening sessions, but also this was during the Affordable Care Act enrollment period. Next slide, please. On the left-hand side, you'll see our interactions with our communities when we were pushing out for the World War II film vets, immigration policy issues. On the right, we have our Filipino Worker Center partnerships with the Empleo Pinoy program. This is addressing vulnerable workers issues. Next slide. Regional network work with commissioners on aging. I saw Daphne here on the line earlier, and we work with. We did, in the middle screen is a shot of our cultural awareness training. This was done during when we recognized and we noticed a rise in anti-Asian sentiments during 2019. We wanted to train first responders on issues affecting the Asian community. We had Chinese, we had Japanese, we had Korean, Thai. We had the Sikh community, we had the Pacific Islander communities all coming together to educate our first responders. These are, and to the right, we had listening sessions in Hawaii, Honolulu. Next slide, please. Our regional network meeting with the Nepalese community in Atlanta. We did capacity building partnerships throughout the country. This was taken in Boston, Massachusetts. Regional network listening session and meetings in Los Angeles with listening into the NAPCA, which is the with issues affecting seniors. Next slide. Our community roundtables in Guam, again, grant writing, capacity building. These are all things we've all done in the past, and our commissioners have always been integral partners in that. Next slide, please. Listening sessions, youth forums, everything has always been. There's really nothing. No topic is off the table for us, and just keep in mind, we depend on our commissioners to work with us in the field as well.
Paul and Ben, sorry, could you mind if I cut you a little bit short here, because we've got some time for questions and I want to make sure we can get the questions in.
Let's jump right in.
So sorry about that.
No, let's do it.
All right.
So as you see, the lineup of questions has already started, and Carrie, I know, asked a question in the chat, but I'm going to start with Dr. Kamal at the beginning, and then we'll sort of go through the questions. I know there's a lot of them for you. Shout out to you, Kamal.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Ben. Pleasure to chat with you guys, and hope to do it in person soon. And please just call me Kamal. Unless I'm prescribing something today. I guess we may need it. Yeah. I guess this is sort of a general question for both of you guys, and maybe to Sonal as well. Are we exploring perhaps creating an incubator for the types of work that you guys are describing, and then through the incubator, it may be just a better way to sort of create the pipeline for the types of products that we're looking to roll out.
So, if you want to jump in, if not, I'm Ben,
why don't you start, and then I'm happy to chime in.
Yeah, I think as Paul pointed out, there's really nothing that's off the table as far as engagement and initiative working within the parameters that we've got to be able to do it. And I think that we have the infrastructure, as Crystal pointed out earlier, to build on some of these things that have happened in the past. And there are some ways to be able to create infrastructure. We've got some great partners within the community to be able to work with and leverage. We've got folks like yourself who have longstanding relationships to be able to create infrastructure to be able to have a continuous level of service for folks. So I think we have the ability to create that. The great thing about the regional network has been that it into itself is incubating resources. And I'm actually going to try and tackle Carrie's question at the same time. We have had successes by the continuum of the regional network throughout across administrations and across changes in administrations and whatnot. So we have an ability to continue the resources and continue the work going forward. This is the first time that the regional network is actually in the EO, which we're super excited about under this administration, to be able to be fully recognized and have the full force and the resources of HHS behind the good work that that we've done, and as well as doing going forward. So I think, Kamal, absolutely, there's some opportunities to be able to engage and create mechanisms to create a pipeline and continue this, as Crystal pointed out, for years to come.
I have nothing else to add, so I'm going to go on to Smitha.
Thank you. So I appreciated hearing from both of you, Ben and Paul. I loved the fact that what I saw was, as we're talking about things to happen in the commission, and Crystal made just a fantastic point earlier about how important it is to have things that sort of last and are implemented. And one of the things I saw in some of the slides you just presented is the implementation piece, it seems to me a little bit. So I was curious how, as we do, I know, for example, the first responder one jumped out at me because several people have in the local area in the Midwest have been talking about how do we engage, how do we communicate with people of these diverse backgrounds, and we want to be respectful, we want to be thoughtful as we're supporting different constituents. So how do we make that connection, or how does, can we do that locally? I saw you did it in another community. Tell me a little bit more about it.
So may I get this? Okay. This thing actually all started organically. We saw some rise in anti-Asian hate, but it wasn't just directed to the Chinese community. It was directed to our Sikh communities. It was after an attack with our Sikh communities, and it was our Muslim communities as well. So we gathered our resources and said, we knew our community they're suffering, but we also wanted to train our first responders to address these issues. What we gathered was talk to some community leaders. We had the FBI. We had the training. Bring in just so many partners. It came in very organically because we knew we had so many people in our community interested in this, in giving presentations to our government officials to tell them this is what you need to be aware of. And we had so many, it became very, very sought after from the federal agencies, but also now the state agencies as well as our local agencies got a wind of it, and they wanted to be involved in it as well, to listen in. So these things coming in, when you bring a topic like this, it just develops organically, and it can and through the convening power of the initiative, we can make this happen very quickly and do this very extensively. Ben?
Yeah, and I think, Samita, to just echo Paul's comments, that last part there, the convening power of the RN, to be able to bring it into communities that are looking for this information, as you're aware of different areas, that's where the leadership of the commission is key. We continue to do it on the federal level through our federal employees and folks, but where our commission sees gaps, where our commission sees for us to present this information and the different resources that you hear about us doing, that's where we're going to be able to work together and be stronger and be able to have a greater impact, because each of you brings so many different resources to the table, as well as voices in areas that may not have been able to be reached before. So it's going to be exciting to work with each of you to be able to push these efforts forward.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Paul.
We're going to cut into our 10-minute break just so we can get the last two questions. So, Victoria, do you want to go?
Yes. Hello, Paul, and it's good to see you again, and Ben. And I know just kind of witnessing the Region 4 work, it was phenomenal, just kind of on the groundwork. And I just kind of the re-engagement and reconvening of like the Region 4 work under Leonpi. Are there plans to kind of recreate that directory? I know that was something that was sought after, like was really an amazing tool kind of in Region 4 for people to connect. And then what are some of the kind of initial launch goals, right, of how this is looking in all of the regions as people kind of re-engage the regional network if they were not active just during the past administration? Because I'm really looking forward to seeing how our different regions or the groundwork is going to reconnect, and then figure out how to advocate and build some of the capacity on the ground.
Ben and Paul, can you just wait 1 second? Can we also get Kai Ying's comment so you can take both of them together? Just because we do have the next presentation starting at 3:20, and we want to make sure we're on time for that. So Kai Ying.
I'll just be very brief. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not familiar with the regional network because I'm a nonprofit leader and organizer, but I just want to share that since you're both located at the U.S. Department of Labor and Small Business Administration, that during the COVID, we had a lot of issues with community businesses accessing any of the funding coming from the federal level and even through SBA. And so I think that for us, it was an intersection of lack of understanding of information coming, or the information was coming so quickly that it was very challenging for small businesses to apply for any of the funding. The second is a language access issue, right? I mean, for example, small nail salon businesses, I mean, even though we have information translated into major languages, many of the small nail salon businesses are owned by Vietnamese people. And so we had to work with our own Department of Economic Development to say to them that they have to translate some of the health guidelines into Vietnamese specific languages. So I don't know what work you're doing now, but I would like to see more of that happening because there's so much funding coming from the federal level. But when it gets to the local level, it's not distributed equitably. And so then it's a lot of hardship on the local nonprofit organizations to be advocating. But I think that there has to be strategies for us to do better and to work closely with all of you. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
And that's why your engagement on the commission is going to be so key. Right? Bringing that voice, bringing that opportunity to be able to help us better serve the different communities that are out there. Specifically with nail salons and throughout the COVID crisis, the regional network as well as our local community efforts have been directed towards that. We had federal agencies, specifically ours, that translated the information into Vietnamese. Paul and I worked together with the regions to be able to do small business events in Vietnamese as well as other languages throughout the country to be able to make sure that language access was a priority. And as I think you heard Crystal say earlier, language access is a key priority for the initiative going forward, and something that we're going to be working very diligently on, as Kamal pointed out, to be able to put some long-lasting changes and implement some resources to be able to make sure that continues. Working with the region, Victoria, and making sure that folks have access to not only information, but government employees and resources to folks to be able to access services is a key priority initiative for us. And it has been throughout the establishment of the RN. We connect the federal resources to the community. And that is one of the big things that we're going to be able to continue to do. And I think, Victoria, you pointed it out, that list and the engagement, as Paul pointed out, has grown. And the amount of interest and the amount of folks that are interested in engaging and doing this work is at an all-time high. And I think that with your guys' active engagement and with our continued collaboration between us, the IWG, the other WIOMPI initiatives, we're going to be able to make a long-lasting, sustainable impact that can really create impact and change. And remember, both Paul and I are here in Los Angeles, so we answer to Kerry, and he's all about making impact and making change in the community here. So we're all ready to get to that work and get it done. And under your guys' leadership and guidance and ideas and resources, we're going to be able to be that much stronger and that much better. And I know we took up more than we should have, but I appreciate it. And we, both Paul and I know, look forward to continuing the conversation going forward.
Ben and Paul, I just want to say thank you so much. This was such a great presentation, even for the short amount of time we had. But just to all of us and as commissioners to remember that the regional network is a super important part of the work that we do, and that is really the touch for all of our communities to be able to both get information of what's working, but also connect more directly into the federal government. So thank you all for what you're doing. We have literally 4 minutes because we have former commissioners coming on to give us input on what they learned over the years. So please come back here by 3 minutes now, by 3:20. Let's take a bio break and come back. Thanks, everyone.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.